Hello, top of Shirtseys. I'm Mark Baldtree's hand on this very busy, noisy Tuesday afternoon. Some food for thought. Where will further cultural change leave our children and grandchildren? In the sense of, as more and more new arrivals come into our glorious city, more and more new arrivals, children, grandchildren will eventually be moving into Scouse schools. The more that move in, the school will change to reflect the culture new arrivals have brought with them. Now, no one's saying any children shouldn't be given education. That's not the point here. The point is, too many coming in to our city, moving into Scouse schools, like Scouse neighbourhoods, it's just the same. Once too many new arrivals move into a Scouse neighbourhood, the neighbourhood changes to reflect the culture new arrivals are brought with them. Well, the same will apply in schools, right? The same will apply there, ladies and gentlemen. The more new arrivals, different ways, beliefs, values, standards move into Scouse schools, those schools will change to reflect the culture new arrivals have brought with them. Yeah, I know schools will say we've got our own curriculum and everyone sticks to that curriculum, but that's really irrelevant, right? Because the more and more new arrivals move into Scouse schools, the more the schools will reflect culture new arrivals have brought with them. The atmosphere, the identity, everything in the schools will naturally change, like it changes like it's changing now in long-standing proud Scouse communities. You can see what is happening. So where does further cultural change leave our children and grandchildren? Well, that's where it leaves them, ladies and gentlemen. Schools where they're going to become a minority, because that's what's happened elsewhere. Leicester, Birmingham, London. Don't say it hasn't, because it has, and the same will happen here. Further cultural change, unlimited amount of new arrivals is not stopped, right? This is all about numbers, it's all about balance, right? Small amounts of new arrivals, small amounts of children of new arrivals in schools isn't a problem. No one would want to deny anyone an education. Too many is the problem. That's what's happening here. It's all about balance, and it's out of balance. So where will further cultural change leave our children and grandchildren? Well, as I've said, not just in long-standing proud Scouse communities, that will reflect the culture new arrivals are bringing with them. But schools will reflect the culture new arrivals have brought with them, regardless what curriculum the education authority has, whatever, right? And don't anyone give me this, that children and future grandchildren of new arrivals will be saying to their parents, listen, we're now Scousers. Okay, sir, all right, Bernie, I'll see you later. Oh, a good old friend of mine there. Wish I could have stopped and talked to him, but I can't. I'm doing a video. So, where was I? So don't give me this, new arrivals are going to say to their parents, listen, the culture you brought with your mum, right, forget that, we're now Scousers. That's not going to happen, because the numbers will predict that. The numbers, because the more new arrivals come in, they're going to stick to their culture. Of course they are. It's like if Scousers went somewhere, they'd stick to their Scouse culture. Of course they will. That's how it works in the real world. So what I'm trying to say here is, the more and more new arrivals come into our city, the more and more their children, grandchildren will eventually move into Scouse schools. As Scouse numbers become fewer and fewer, then the whole school, the classroom, the playground reflects the culture new arrivals have brought with them. That's how it works, ladies and gentlemen, right? And that's what's happened to Leicester, Birmingham, London, many other places that have been changed to such an extent they will never ever see their former glory. And remember this, right? If I'm talking a load of nonsense, the new arrivals do indeed adopt the culture of their host, then What's happened in Blackburn, Oldham, Burnley, where parallel lives prevail? Can anyone answer that one? That I'd like to know. Well, exactly. They don't forsake the culture they bring. In fact, the complete opposite. They continue with the culture they bring. They don't forsake it. So where does this leave our children and our grandchildren regarding further cultural change? Well, we know where it leaves them. They're going to end up in schools where they're getting fewer and fewer, and the culture new arrivals have brought with them will dominate. They will be outcasts, because that's what's happened in these schools across London, Birmingham, Leicester, right? The local hosts, they've had to leave and go because they don't feel welcome or at home. And that's how it works. Like, when they first come here and they're going into a Scouse school or a Cockney school or a Brummie school, they probably didn't feel at home. But as the numbers increased, then they did. And the host then was, the host community was driven out or left, whatever. That's how it works in the real world, ladies and gentlemen, not the fantasy world. So that's where further cultural change leaves our children and grandchildren. This is not a future we want to leave them, right? We don't have the right to. Remember, say no to cultural change, yes to Scouse pride. Shout it out loud, Scouse and proud. Okay, thank you. Hello, I'm still here. Tommy Church, Seaport, C7 Prime Market on this very noisy, busy Tuesday afternoon. There's a lot going on. Buskers, religious activists. Great, brilliant. You see, what you've got to remember here, ladies and gentlemen, we're in possession, metaphorically speaking, of a crystal ball. We know what's happened to these schools in Leicester, London, Birmingham, right, Bradford, Oldham, and all the rest of the places. We know what has happened, so no one can say it hasn't happened. It has happened. We know what has happened. So before anyone says, "You're talking nonsense, Joe," well, I'm not, because the proof is in the pudding, like I've said many times before. If I was talking nonsense, then what's happened to these places then? Well, you know I'm not talking nonsense. And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to undergo the same fate if we don't stop this. You've got to find a candidate at the next forthcoming election, reliable, credible, opposed to further cultural change, and give them your vote. We've got to vote these reckless politicians out, because we will undergo the same fate. And like I've said, you can't say we won't, because the proof's in the pudding. We know what's happened to these other places. We've watched what's happened to them. How can anyone say it hasn't happened? How can anyone say with uncontrolled new arrivals coming into our glorious city, it will never happen here? Of course it will. And it is happening. Schools, okay mate, okay. Schools are changing more and more each day. Listen, I've got nieces who've got children. I've got nephews who've got children. And they're telling me what is happening in schools now. There is a cultural change, right? And if this continues, Scouse kids are going to be fewer and fewer. And then these schools, like I've said, reflect the culture new arrivals are brought with them. And if anyone believes new arrivals are forsaking their culture to adopt ours, you need to give your head a wobble. Because that's not the real world, I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen. Right, that's a fantasy world, right? Like I've said, what's happened then? If I'm wrong, what has happened to Leicester? What's happened to London, Birmingham? I'm not wrong. Bradford, right? What has happened to these places then? If Joe Owens has got all this wrong, making it all up, just coming down here to cause trouble, then what's happened to these other places? You know what's happened to them. And if we don't stop this, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to undergo the same fate. New arrivals, once they're in the driving seat, there is no messing about from them. They're playing for keeps, right? They're giving nothing back. We have to oppose this, ladies and gentlemen. These reckless politicians, bogus super scousers, phony journalists, whatever, right? We've got to stand up to them and tell them this is our city. It belongs to our children, grandchildren, and all those amazing Scousers yet to be born. We cannot pass this mess down to them, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have the right to. And neither do these reckless politicians. A few new arrivals wouldn't have been a problem, but that's not what's happened, and it's not what is happening. We can see what's happening. There is a cultural change that if not stopped, long term will be disastrous for our city, right? It will be disastrous, ladies and gentlemen. We've watched what's happened to all these other major towns and cities. So like I've said, the proof is in the pudding. We have, metaphorically speaking, a crystal ball. The crystal ball is warning us, telling us what's on the way and how it unfolds. It's already landed here, it's sinking its roots, so we know what's happening. We're going to go now, ladies and gentlemen. But remember, say no to cultural change. Yes to Scouse pride. Shout it out loud, Scouse and proud. Okay, thank you.